Brexit has failed. Those are the words of the former leader of the Brexit party, Nigel Farage. And while even his most staunch supporters would disagree with him, his claim does have a certain truth value. Britain had a plan. It would leave the EU and seek trade agreements with the world's superpowers as it deemed fit. It was supposed to flaunt the autonomy that its EU arch-rivals Germany and France didn't have. But 3 years later, Britain is still struggling to stand on its feet as its role in European Union politics remains shaky. So, what's happening in the old continent? What Brexit meant. Here's the thing. Brexit meant many things to many people. Shackled by Brussels, the Brits wanted a way out to reform the great English dynasty. For some, it was about economic, monetary and trade liberties. And for others, it was about placing restrictive immigration policies. But most commonly, there was a single narrative about creating a global Britain. In the famous words of Theresa May, Brexit would make the UK a great global trading nation that is respected around the world and strong, confident and united at home. Her successor Boris Johnson would echo the same sentiments. Brexit was about being able to do our free trade deals as one UK, whole and entire. Later, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak would also envision a Britain that takes control of its law and destiny. While the UK still had to grapple with its post-Brexit economic reality, there was a certain narrative support for the initiative. Euroscepticism in the country was immense, and it wasn't entirely shocking that the British voted for Brexit, albeit on a knife edge. But now, a mere 3 years later, and one of the movement's chief champions has called the initiative a failure. And largely because, with Brexit, there was a certain promise. The United Kingdom would take a more prominent global role. And that's precisely why the country would prosper economically and otherwise. Somehow, such ambitious goals were deemed achievable outside of Europe. But as it stands today, the UK is still searching to find its political role in the world order. If anything, it's still trying to find an image outside its former label as a top-tier powerful EU country. The European Union hangover is far too visceral. Anyone living under the country's cost of living crisis would testify to that. Don't get us wrong though, the UK isn't completely detached from the European Union. In September 2023, Prime Minister Sunak fought tooth and nail to revive the country's crucial scientific and technological alliances with the EU. The UK's scientific community was jubilant. After all, the UK had rejoined the Horizon Europe Science Research Programme that gets £85 billion annually in funding. At the same time, the UK also rejoined the EU's Copernicus Earth Observation Satellite Programme, which has been critical in overwatching critical weather events, including wildfires across Europe. So there's no doubt that these revived partnerships would be fruitful. But Sunak's deep efforts to appease the European Commission were a jolting reminder. Has Britain achieved the autonomy outside the EU that it fought so hard for? And while we're at it, has the country figured out its new global role that was the post-Brexit reality? Last time we checked, the UK wanted to reignite its strategic global partnership with the US, but even Washington DC won't negotiate with an EU remnant for a UK-USA free trade deal. Yeah, no wonder Farage thinks that Brexit has failed. Britain's not-so-heroic journey. When the UK became the poster child for Euroscepticism, many other European counterparts saw it as an entity setting an example. Anti-EU opposition parties, especially in Eastern Europe, had seen the country as the classic trope of a hero's journey. They were all eagerly waiting for Brits to embark on a turbulent adventure and learn new lessons to live an autonomous life. The idea was to see the UK as a bellwether, a test run for what could happen when you leave the great European equaliser. And, well, let's just say that the country is suffering economically. The UK's current cost of living crisis means people can't access basic necessities like food. Food banks have never been higher before, and the inflation rate is also historically high. In 2023, the IMF forecasted Britain to have a worse economy than war-driven, sanction-stricken Russia. What tipped the odds against the country's favour was its automobile industry, which employs 800,000 people. Post-Brexit, the automotive industry has struggled to keep their shops open. Companies like Ford, Jaguar Land Rover and Vauxhall urged their government to renegotiate a new deal with the EU. The government found itself in tight corners again and again, so all in all, the UK's hero journey hasn't been very heroic so far. Theresa May had hoped to take the reins of the European bloc that wants to push for free trade outside the old continent, but her successors failed in their promise to strike big deals with powerhouses like the US. Britain's role in European politics. Even with Euroscepticism on the rise in the continent, Britain is struggling to find its new role in the world order. Not to mention, the economy is faltering. Sure, leaders like Farage had already warned the public about the immediate dip in GDP in the post-Brexit world, but he had also promised other small wins, like the reduced influx of refugees into the country. And yet, that didn't happen either. If anything, immigration in the UK shot up after leaving the EU and is now at record highs. Historically, geopolitical superpowers have ruled the world because of their immense economic powerhouses. Look at China or the US. Now, even after finding greater autonomy in trade, Britain is simply not there. But of course, there's more to the story than meets the eye. Global Britain had to find a new role in European politics. In doing so, it had the most pressing incentive to become the European NATO flag bearer. And as the biggest donor of the Ukrainian cause on the continent right now, it has proved to be more than diligent. But May and her successors had a clear-cut plan to differentiate itself from the current European Union superpowers like Germany and France. The UK was hoping to be the balancing act between three main stakeholders, the EU, China and the US. But the timing of Brexit was more than inconvenient. The US president at the time, Donald Trump, didn't believe in the collectivization of NATO, and he also began an aggressive trade war with the eastern superpower China. Today, the EU's trade relationship with Beijing is a slippery slope. Look at Germany, for instance. The growing protectionism in China has hurt its trade pursuits with Berlin, making the EU powerhouse falter on its knees, and we have a couple of videos on this channel exploring exactly that. The idea from Britain was that the UK, free from EU regulations, would find a new strategic trade era with Xi Jinping by appeasing largely to the US foreign policy. That utopian dynamic would have set Britain apart in the old continent. Yet, China's active shutdown of the diaspora in Hong Kong, multiple spyware incidents, and ardent support of Russia crushed Britain's dream. What really happened was a hard-hitting realization, a bitter pill Britain had to swallow. For countries outside Europe, the UK was attractive because of its EU card and not in spite of it. For years, the UK was the focal point for the US, which needed a powerful, assertive country inside the EU that could reap benefits for NATO. The UK would rally support for the organisation's core policies and its position as the quintessential military alliance for the West. Needless to say, the US has found new alternatives on the continent, even if it's by a lot of manoeuvring. Germany has rallied behind the US in the war in Ukraine. To be fair, the Brexit negotiation plan had already proved that the EU had an upper hand over the UK. On every single negotiation table, the British government had stumbled. Eventually, it was easy for the EU to move past its reliance on the UK. In fact, the former EU member would renegotiate trade agreements as its local economy struggled. In this scenario, it's as clear as daylight. The UK has yet to figure out how to situate itself in Europe. Sure, it still remains a quintessential military power, but with the economic crisis at home, its promise to be a global Britain falters. May and her successors had plans to reignite competitive economic policies with Canada, Australia, New Zealand and the Commonwealth. But so far, it keeps returning to its old friend to reap economic, military and technological tenets to survive. Politically, the UK looks weak as it continuously chips away its bargaining power with the European Union. It truly seems to be in a checkmate. So there you have it. Thank you for watching this video on the UK's role in EU politics post-Brexit. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. What do you think is the right way forward for Britain? Do you have any predictions for how the UK's role in the EU might evolve in the coming months? And do you think that a rejoin is on the horizon? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section below. Make sure to subscribe to our channel for more updates and insights on the latest economic developments. We analyse the latest trending economic news, so keep a close watch, and until next time, take care.